They told you the world was ruled by chance, by noise, by crowds screaming loud enough to drown out truth. They told you to bow your head, follow the script, wait your turn. But something inside you refused the script. Something ancient, unbreakable, stood up and said no. Not to the chaos, not to the corruption, not to the crawling shadows that feast on fear. You walked into a city choking on its own nightmares, and instead of becoming one more lost soul, you drew a line no monster could cross. While others begged for mercy from the darkness, you became the verdict. Not a tyrant, not a savior in shining myths, but a living scale, balancing what was broken. Daring to call the demons by their true names, and watching them crumble under the weight of a law older than crowns and sharper than any blade. Handed you a script before you could even speak. Lines carefully inked by trembling hands, margins filled with warnings, stage directions whispering when to smile, when to kneel, when to clap for a world that feeds on obedience. You were meant to read it, memorize it, live it, and never once question who wrote it or why the ink always smelled like fear. Every street sign, every classroom bell, every polished speech from a comfortable throne repeated the same quiet command: stay small, stay soft, stay predictable. Because predictable people are easy to stack, easy to number, easy to bury beneath the weight of other people's decisions. But something in you kept misreading the lines. Where they promised safety, you tasted cages. Where they praised order, you heard chains dragging across concrete. The crowd recited their parts in perfect rhythm, nodding along to rules that bent whenever power leaned on them, yet snapped the moment truth tried to stand upright. And you watched, silent at first, noticing how chaos wasn't the storm outside the walls but the rot inside them. Smiles painted over clenched teeth, laws spoken with trembling voices, morality auctioned to the highest bidder, while everyone pretended the gavel still struck clean and fair. Refusing the script isn't loud in the beginning. It's a quiet itch under the skin, an uncomfortable laugh at the wrong moment, a pause when everyone else says yes without thinking. It's the decision to read the fine print of reality and realize the contract was never meant to protect you, only to contain you. They will tell you rebellion looks like fire and broken glass, but the truth's defiance starts as clarity. You begin to see the invisible strings twitching above every grand performance. You notice how fear is rehearsed, how outrage is scheduled, how even despair is packaged and sold back to those who suffer it. And once you see the stage hands moving the props, you can't unsee them. The script survives on repetition, on habits carved so deep they masquerade as destiny, on people mistaking routine for righteousness. Refusing it means tearing your name off the cast list and stepping into the unscripted dark, where there are no cues, no applause signs, no comforting lies to soften the fall. It means accepting that confusion is more honest than false certainty, that standing alone in truth is cleaner than marching in formation toward decay. The moment you stop waiting for permission, the walls start to sweat. They will call you dangerous for asking simple questions. They will label you unstable for noticing obvious cracks. They will try to drag you back into character with promises, threats, distractions, anything to keep the play running smoothly. Because the script does not fear hatred, it feeds on it. It does not fear noise, it conducts it. What it fears is the one voice that refuses to repeat the chorus, the one mind that looks at painted scenery and says, this is cardboard, this is glue, this is a trick. Refusal is not destruction for its own sake. It is the refusal to decorate decay. It is the choice to stand upright in a room designed to keep everyone comfortably bent. You are not burning the theater down. You are turning on the lights and watching illusions wither under honest sight. And as the glow spreads, the actors falter, the masks itch, the audience shifts uneasily, realizing the story they trusted was only ever a cage, built from familiar words and inherited fears and you are still standing there, off script, unlit, unnumbered, watching the machinery grind and waiting for the moment it forgets how to pretend. Balance was never meant to be comfortable. It was forged where opposites grind their teeth against each other, where mercy and consequence share the same narrow ledge and every step threatens a fall into excess. Most people flee that ledge. They pick a side, build a home there, and spend their lives shouting across the gap. But you chose the place where the wind cuts from both directions, where certainty dies and judgment is born breathing hard and wide awake. Ruin is easy. It is gravity doing what gravity does, dragging everything down to the lowest point, inviting bitterness to masquerade as wisdom, and destruction to parade as strength. Justice is harder. It asks for steady hands while the world throws stones, for clear sight while smoke fills the lungs, for a spine that does not bend when chaos offers shortcuts paved with bones. To stand between them is to feel both temptations clawing at your ribs, one whispering burn it all, the other daring you to look away and call that peace. The scales you carry are not made of polished metal. They are scars, memories, choices that still echo at night. Every lie you refuse to repeat adds weight to one side. Every cruelty you denied entry adds weight to the other. The beam trembles because truth is alive, and anything alive moves. Those who worship ruin want the tremble to become collapse. Those who worship false order want the scales nailed in place so nothing ever changes. You deny them both the comfort of extremes. To be the living balance is to disappoint everyone who profits from absolutes. You will not become their executioner drunk on punishment, nor their saint blind to harm. You will not confuse vengeance with law or forgiveness with surrender. When they demand, you choose a mask. You show them a face that refuses paint. When they beg for simple answers, you hand them a mirror and let them wrestle with what looks back. This position has no shelter. Storms strike from every direction, because standing in the middle makes you visible to all who fear measurement. Demagogues hate scales because scales expose weight. Monsters hate scales because scales refuse to kneel. Even the lost sometimes hate scales because balance reveals the cost of every step they took in darkness, believing no one would count the footprints. Yet you remain, feet planted on a line so thin it slices the unwary. You learn to listen to the creak of the beam, to feel the shift before the fall. A single act of courage can outweigh a mountain of threats. A single honest word can crack a fortress of polished deceit. But you also learn that one moment of careless wrath can tilt everything toward the abyss. So your vigilance becomes a kind of art, not frozen stillness but deliberate motion, micro adjustments against the constant pull of entropy and rage. They will try to drag you into their gravity wells. They will dress ruin in righteous colors and paint injustice with the soft hues of necessity. They will tell you that tipping the scales, just this once, will fix everything forever. But forever is the favorite lie of those who cannot survive the present without breaking it. You answer them not with slogans but with weight, with consequence measured in full view, with decisions that refuse the intoxication of excess. In that narrow space between collapse and cruelty, you become something unsettling to behold. Not a blade swinging wildly, not a shield hiding from impact, but the fulcrum itself, the point around which chaos is forced to reckon with limits. And as the winds howl and the ground shakes and every faction screams for the world to lean their way, you keep adjusting, breathing through the strain, holding the trembling beam level while the storm pounds against your ribs and the abyss waits impatiently for you to slip. Most horrors survive on anonymity. They grow fat in the fog, stretch their limbs in the blind spots, feed on the polite habit of looking away. Call them problems, call them bad days, call them the way things are. And they will purr like well-fed beasts curled up behind respectable words. They do not need chains or claws when they have euphemisms. They do not need armies when they have silence. Running from them is the oldest dance. Quick steps, shallow breaths, eyes fixed on the nearest exit sign painted by someone else's trembling hand. You tell yourself distance is safety, that if you keep moving the shadows, will get bored and chase someone slower. But shadows do not tire. They simply wait for you to build a home around your avoidance, brick by careful brick, until the walls themselves begin to whisper the names you refuse to say. Naming a demon is an act of exposure. It drags the creature from myth into measurement. It steals its favorite weapon, vagueness. Once named, it cannot hide behind excuses stitched from tradition and convenience. It can no longer pretend to be a harmless habit or an unfortunate accident. The moment your voice shapes its true outline, it loses the luxury of pretending to be weather. They will warn you not to speak, not because they doubt you are wrong, but because they fear you might be precise. Precision is a blade that cuts through shared delusion. A crowd can tolerate screams. It cannot tolerate clarity. Screams are noise, and noise is easy to drown. But a clear, steady naming rings like metal on bone. Echoing in places lies cannot comfortably live. When you name it, you feel the temperature change. Conversations stiffen. Smiles fracture at the edges. Those who benefited from the creature's shadow suddenly find reasons to defend the dark. They will accuse you of exaggeration, of cruelty, of disturbing the peace. Notice how peace always seems to mean the uninterrupted feeding of whatever stalked the night before you lit a match. The demon will fight back, not with fangs but with mirrors. It will try to convince you that the shape you revealed is your own reflection, that you are the true danger, the true distortion, the true chaos. Because if it can make you doubt the sound of your own voice, it can crawl back into the unnamed and swell there again, heavier, hungrier, patient. Naming is not shouting into the void. It is carving letters into the door so the thing inside cannot pretend it was never there. Each syllable is a lock clicking into place. Each honest description is a wall closing around its wandering form. You are not chasing it through endless corridors. You are collapsing the maze until it stands exposed in a single, unforgiving room. Others will start to see it too, though many will pretend they do not. Some will thank you in whispers. Some will curse you in public. A few will try to rename it into something softer, rounder, easier to forgive. Watch how language becomes a battlefield where every word is either a veil or a blade. Choose your weapons carefully and refuse the velvet sheaths offered by trembling hands. Because once a demon is named, it demands response. No more drifting past it with polite nods. No more blaming the darkness for what the darkness was hiding. The name hangs in the air like a bell that cannot be unrung, forcing every passerby to decide whether they will cover their ears or turn toward the sound. And as that sound spreads, ricocheting through halls built on comfortable lies, the creature shrinks from legend to liability, from nightmare to target, from untouchable terror to something that can be faced, measured, challenged, and held in the harsh, unwavering light of a voice that refuses to forget what it called it the first time it spoke and felt the walls tremble and the shadows pull back just enough to reveal teeth and chains and the long, shaking outline of what was always there, waiting for someone reckless enough to say its name out loud and keep saying it while the echoes refused to die and the silence tried to swallow the sound, but could not quite close its jaws around it. Defiance begins as a spark, reckless and bright, a laugh in the wrong place, a refusal that tastes like iron on the tongue. But sparks die quickly when they burn alone. The world has learned to outweight rebellion, to let it flare and fade, to sweep the ashes into neat little piles labeled youthful anger, temporary madness, unfortunate impulse. If you want that spark to survive the long night, you have to feed it something stronger than rage. Rage is loud but brittle. It shatters against the first wall built from patience and procedure. Law, true law, is different. It is rhythm instead of noise, repetition instead of explosion. It walks the same path again and again until the ground itself reshapes around its footsteps. Turning defiance into law means teaching your fire to march instead of dance, to endure instead of merely ignite. The inner refusal you carry is raw ore, heavy with possibility, but useless in its untouched state. You must drag it through the furnace of discipline, let it melt. Let the impurities scream as they burn away. This is the part no one applauds. There is no thunder when you choose consistency over spectacle. No cheering crowd when you say no for the 1,000th time with the same steady voice you used the first. But with each repetition, the molten metal pours into a mold the chaos cannot easily crack. Unbreakable law is not written on paper. Paper tears. It is carved into habit, etched into muscle memory, breathed until it replaces instinct. You wake with it. You walk with it. You answer temptation with it before temptation even finishes speaking. Others look for dramatic gestures, for grand moments of rebellion to point at and praise or condemn. They miss the quiet architecture forming beneath your skin, the pillars rising one deliberate action at a time. This transformation terrifies the forces that thrive on your unpredictability. They can dodge a tantrum, deflect an outburst, outmaneuver a sudden strike, but they cannot easily bend a pattern that repeats with surgical calm. Your defiance stops being a reaction and becomes a rule. Not a rule handed down from some distant throne, but one hammered out in the workshop of your own decisions, day after day, blow after blow. There will be days when the old spark begs to break formation, to leap wildly just to feel alive. You will feel the seduction of chaos dressed up as authenticity, whispering that structure is surrender. But you know the truth carved into your bones, without form. Fire is only destruction, and destruction alone is a servant of the very disorder you rose to oppose. So you keep the beat, step after step, letting endurance do what fury never could. People will call you rigid. They will say you have changed, that the wildness they once feared or admired has been replaced by something colder. Let them talk. They mistake the sheath for the blade. They do not see that every measured movement contains more force than 1,000 frantic swings. Your restraint is not weakness, it is stored thunder, waiting for the moment when release will mean restoration instead of ruin. As this law hardens inside you, choices become clearer, not easier. You feel the weight of every action before you take it, like a judge sensing the echo of the verdict before the gavel falls. You do not drift anymore. You decide, again and again, even when the decision costs you comfort, approval, companionship. Especially then. Because each costly decision tempers the steel, turning personal rebellion into a structure others can lean on without it collapsing beneath them. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your presence begins to bend the air around you. Disorder hesitates. Manipulation loses its grip. The chaotic tides that once dragged you under now break against a shoreline that did not exist before you carved it into being with repetition, with discipline, with the relentless refusal to betray the rule you forged from your own defiant heart and carried through fire until it cooled into something no pressure could warp, and no storm could scatter, and no whisper of doubt could melt back into shapeless heat. Darkness has a talent for imitation. It studies the shapes of heroes, memorizes the posture of saints, learns the vocabulary of justice, then steps into the light wearing a familiar smile. Those who rush in swinging often find, too late, that every blow they strike feeds the very night they meant to end. Because darkness does not always resist force. Sometimes it absorbs it, drinks it, grows heavier and more convincing with every careless act done in its name. Walking into it is not the same as becoming it. The difference is thin, sharp, and constantly moving. Cross it once without noticing, and your reflection starts to change before anyone else can warn you. The anger that guided your feet becomes the hunger that guides your hands. The purpose that steadied your breath becomes the excuse that loosens your grip. Soon, the shadows do not need to chase you. They simply keep pace beside you, matching your stride, whispering that you have always belonged together. The night will invite you to wear its tools: quick solutions, brutal shortcuts, beautiful lies that promise victory without cost. They glitter like trophies in a glass case, each one humming with the power to end the struggle instantly if only you agree to look away from the price tag etched on the underside. Many do. They lift the tool, feel its weight, and mistake the sudden silence for peace instead of absence. To walk through darkness without becoming it, you must carry a light that hurts your own eyes as much as anyone else's. Not a spotlight to blind your enemies, but a bare bulb hanging over your own thoughts, exposing every creeping justification before it hardens into belief. Self-deception is the night's favorite doorway. Leave it unlocked and the shadows stroll in, politely rearranging your furniture while you congratulate yourself on your courage. You will feel the cold, not just around you, but inside, pressing against your ribs, testing the warmth of your convictions for weak spots. Compassion will seem naive. Restraint will feel wasteful. Mercy will look suspiciously like surrender. The darkness excels at redefining virtues into vulnerabilities. It wants you to be efficient, decisive, unburdened by doubt. It wants you to trade humanity for certainty and call the bargain maturity. But you keep the doubt. You guard it like a relic. Because doubt forces you to look twice before you strike, to listen once more before you condemn. It slows the hand just enough for conscience to catch up. In that fraction of hesitation lies the difference between a protector and a predator. Predators are fast. Protectors are careful. Every step forward is a negotiation with temptation. Not the obvious temptation to destroy, but the quieter urge to justify. To say this once is necessary, this line can blur, this rule can bend. Darkness rarely asks for surrender all at once. It requests small permissions, harmless exceptions, reasonable compromises. Each one feels trivial. Together they redraw your silhouette until the outline no longer belongs to the person who first entered the night. So you measure yourself constantly. Not against your enemies, not against applause, but against the promise you made before the first step. You remember why you walked in at all. Not to rule the dark, not to paint it your color, but to pass through it, carrying something it cannot digest. You refuse the easy language of hatred even when hatred speaks your name with intimate familiarity. You deny the thrill of dominance even when dominance would end the argument in a single motion. And as the path narrows and the shadows lean close enough to feel your pulse, you move with deliberate care, letting principle set the pace instead of fury, letting conscience draw the map instead of fear, knowing that the only true victory in this landscape is to emerge with your face unchanged, your voice uncorrupted, your hands still capable of building what they once swore to defend while the night coils and recoils around your steps. Waiting for the slip you never granted. Madness loves vacancy. Give it an empty space and it will decorate the walls with panic, furnish the floors with rumors, hang fear from the ceiling like a chandelier that never stops swaying. Disorder does not arrive with a trumpet. It seeps in through cracks left unattended, through moments when everyone assumes someone else will set things straight. In that hesitation, chaos builds a throne out of abandoned responsibility and sits on it grinning. You do not evict it with noise. You do not chase it with spectacle. You starve it by making the ground beneath it predictable, solid, unwilling to shift for every passing whim. Order is not a cage dropped from above. It is a pattern drawn again and again until even the wildest impulses learn the borders of the dance floor. Where madness thrives on surprise, you answer with reliability. Where it feeds on confusion, you answer with clarity repeated until doubt grows bored and wanders off hungry. This work is unglamorous. There are no fireworks in consistency, no headlines in doing the right thing for the 100th time when the first would have earned applause. Yet each repeated act is a brick, each honest decision a beam, each kept promise a bolt tightening the frame. Slowly, a structure rises in a place that once echoed with aimless shouting. Not a monument to control, but a shelter sturdy enough that storms must go around instead of through. Madness will test the walls. It will slam itself against your patterns, hoping to shake loose a habit, to pry open a corner where old chaos can slip back inside wearing a familiar grin. It will tempt you to improvise recklessly, to abandon the rhythm you built for the thrill of a dramatic gesture. But drama is its native language. Predictability is the dialect it cannot master. So you keep the beat steady and almost boring, and watch the wildness stumble over steps it cannot anticipate. Others may mistake your steadiness for coldness. They grew accustomed to the roar, to the rush of constant crisis, to the strange comfort of living on the edge of collapse. Calm feels suspicious to those addicted to alarms. They will poke at your foundations, daring you to erupt, just to prove you still feel. You answer not with eruption, but with endurance, letting time itself testify that stability is not emptiness, but strength stretched across hours instead of moments. Order is not the absence of motion. It is motion that knows where it is going. It bends without breaking, adapts without dissolving. You allow change, but only through doors, not through cracks. You welcome innovation, but anchor it to principle so novelty cannot masquerade as progress while dragging the room back into fog. In this way, the space grows alive rather than rigid, guided rather than gripped. Where madness once ruled through unpredictability, you introduce consequence, not punishment as spectacle, but response as certainty. Actions meet outcomes with such dependable precision that chaos finds no shadows to hide its excuses. When cause and effect walk hand in hand, confusion loses its favorite disguise. The air clears, voices lower, choices sharpen, because everyone knows the ground will hold exactly as it did yesterday and will again tomorrow. In that reliability, courage changes shape. It no longer looks like reckless leaps into burning rooms. It looks like tending the fire so it warms instead of consumes. It looks like sweeping the same floor until dust forgets how to settle. It looks like returning, again and again, to the small disciplines that keep collapse at bay long enough for hope to build furniture and hang windows and invite light to sit comfortably where panic once sprawled. And as this quiet architecture spreads, room by room, habit by habit, the old madness finds fewer places to perch, fewer echoes to amplify, fewer cracks to widen into chasms, until the territory it once claimed as its natural kingdom becomes a landscape of measured steps and open sight lines where frenzy falters at the threshold, pacing outside foundations it cannot uproot, watching patterns repeat with patient defiance while the space within holds firm, breath steady, lines true, refusing to surrender its shape to the tantrums beyond the door.